Greetings! In today's video, I will be taking a look at this palette of 36 colors from Paul Rubens, along with this little sketchbook that is also from Paul Rubens. The palette is a selection of 36 colors that comes in a really beautiful tin that is made to have 48 colors in it, so you have a whole row at the bottom that is empty. There's also an extra 3 pans. I appreciate it, but I'm not entirely sure why. It's great, it's just we don't see that often. The doubles for this palette are lemon yellow hue, intense green, and ultramarine blue, which is an interesting selection. I would be curious to know why they picked these 3 colors, but cool. I think it would have been fun to have perhaps a red in there or a magenta, so you kind of have this little extra primary triad of sorts that you could put in a different tin or something. That's a fun gift with this palette. Each of the pan is wrapped in its own wrapper, but they're all visually the same. They're not a different color. The paint info is on the wrapper, so there's that. I've noticed a couple of weird typos and mistakes while transferring the info from the wrappers to my swatches, but that's not exactly something new. There's always a typo here or there with paints, and I've seen it in just about all of the ranges. So the pans themselves don't have any kind of label, so you have to label them yourself, which I would highly recommend doing because you don't want to be stuck with a bunch of pans that you don't know what colors they are. And then we also get a really nice swatch card with all the pigment info and the paint info, and funnily enough, it is printed on their sparkly watercolor paper. So if you look at it closely in the proper lighting, you will see some little sparkles in the paper. I think with this set, the most striking feature really is the tin. It is really pretty. I really like this print. I think it's the perfect kind of design for a watercolor palette, to have a big, colorful, vibrant wash of color printed on the tin, and it looks like a real paint wash rather than something that has been digitally enhanced or modified. And I also really like that both the lid and the bottom of the palette have that print, because it makes it much easier to spot regardless of the angle in which you see it. About the colors, I counted 34 pigments over 36 colors. Of these 36 colors, we have 15 that are single pigment paints. We have 17 that have 2 pigments, and we have 4 that have 3 or more pigments. I always say the number of pigments, they don't really change anything. It's not the number of pigment that makes a difference. It's the properties of each pigment in a mix that ultimately matters, but that's a whole other topic for another video. Which, I mean, let me know if you want to see that video. I'm going to go through the colors in sort of color family and do a really quick rundown of each color. Starting with the neutrals, I've put 3 colors in this category. I've put Chinese white, lamp black, and Payne's gray. The Chinese white was a bit disappointing to me. Usually we get titanium white when we get a white in a set, if you're lucky. It is, in my opinion, the more useful white because it's a bit more opaque. I never really quite know what to do with Chinese white because it's not opaque enough to work out highlights or something, and it's a bit too opaque to enjoy it in mixes, so I'm not sure what to use that one for. Then we have the lamp black, which is really lovely in this palette. I really like it. It's a nice, perhaps slightly warm black. And then we get the Payne's gray, which is also really, really nice and super interesting, this one, as it's made with PBK 11, and that is Mars black. It is a black pigment that often granulates, and in the case of this paint, it kind of looks like it's granulating. And it's mixed with PB29, which is also a granulating pigment. It's ultramarine blue. So we have a Payne's gray here that is really full of character and texture, and I really like it. Then we have 5 colors that I would put in the yellow category. First one is unfortunately called flesh color. I don't like it when the peachy colors are labeled something like skin or flesh. It's just really awkward. The color itself is a nice mix. This one has PW6 in it, so that titanium white, and a yellow, but it makes for a slightly peachy orange color, which I think is quite nice, but it needs a new name. Then we have lemon yellow hue, which is also really interesting. Nice yellow. It's our sort of neutral yellow. It's a bit on the cool side, but it is the most yellow we have in this palette. Then we have cadmium yellow pale hue, a mix of 2 pigments. It is a really nice warm yellow, kind of in between the previous color and the next color, which is cadmium yellow hue, also a mix of two pigments and a really warm, almost orange kind of yellow. And then we have a really special color, in my opinion. I was not expecting this color really. When I saw the name and the pigment info, I was not expecting this particular hue. Now, the pigment itself, PY153, is technically a pigment that is no longer manufactured. It is a color a bit like the previous one we just saw, like a very warm yellow. I was not expecting a color that would be closer to something like a quinacridone gold, which is what we have here. It is a really transparent color that is sort of more orange brown in the mass tone and then gets really yellow in the undertone when diluted. So I'm not entirely sure what's up here. I was expecting the PY153 to be a flat, warm yellow color, and then we get a transparent color that I would also say is a bit of a warm yellow, but really not characteristic of this pigment. So I don't know what's up here, but I love this color. I'm not gonna complain. I'm just puzzled. Then we have one orange, our single orange of this palette. It is labeled cadmium orange hue. It is a mix of two pigments. There's one pigment in the mix that's a more of a fugitive pigment. It's less light fast, so you would have to take that into account when using this color. Then we have four reds. Our first red is cadmium red hue. It is a mix of two pigments. It is a really interesting mix because we get a nice strong red with a slightly warm, like a bit yellow undertone when you dilute it. In the mass tone, it is bright red, but when you add water to it, you kind of get this warmth that comes through. And then the other sort of cadmium red that we have here is cadmium red deep hue. It is also a mix of two pigments. For this red, it is also very bright and intense in the mass tone, but when you diluted this one, it gets to be a bit more pink. It is less yellow. So two very versatile reds in the set. And then we get alizarin crimson hue, which is also very interesting on its own because it is labeled as being made from PR206, which is a discontinued pigment too. So that's our second discontinued pigment so far. The color itself is a really nice deep dark red. It is really nice and intense, but I did not expect to have this pigment in here. And then the last red is also using this pigment, but in a very unusual hue for this pigment because it is much more pink when this pigment is usually more of a dark orange to violet brown kind of color. Then we have our single magenta color, which is permanent rose made from PV19. That's a bit of a standard thing, and it seems to be really nice as far as magenta colors go. Following that, we have three purples or violet. We have Purple Lake, and that's another one that I did a double take because it is listed as being made from PR88, which is Theo Indigo Violet, and other discontinued pigment. It's no longer manufactured either, so I'm not entirely sure what's happening here. And I don't really have any swatch of this one to compare, so I can't really say if it's the proper hue or if it's plausible that it's actually a PR88, but it is a really nice color. The next one is bright purple. It is made of two pigments, a pink and a purple, leaning more on the pink side, and we get a color that is similar to the one we just saw. And the last purple is deep purple. It is the same mix as the color we just saw, but leaning much more towards the purple pigment in the mix rather than the pink pigment in the mix. Then we have six blues. First one being cerulean blue hue. It is a really beautiful cyan color. It is not the most deep of the cyan colors. Very handy color to have around because it's a bit of a aqua turquoise. It's like this really, really yellow blue, but still blue. So very useful color. Really nice, this one. Then we have cobalt blue hue, which is the kind of usual way I've seen companies go about a cobalt blue hue, which is to mix ultramarine blue and a white or filler pigment to make it less intense in the mass tone. So we have a blue that has a nice texture here, but that is also very similar to the following color, which is ultramarine on its own. It is not exactly the same hue, but I don't know if it makes enough of a difference that you would actually use both. Maybe you do. If so, well, that's good. This ultramarine blue is pretty much what we usually get for ultramarine blue. It is a really nice deep blue color with a really fun texture and granulation going. Then we have intense blue. This one is PB15 on its own. It's very similar to the cerulean blue hue, but with a much deeper mass tone here. Then we have turquoise blue, which is a mix of three pigments. Now this one is also peculiar because it has PB17 in it. And I haven't been able to really source the info whether or not this pigment is discontinued, but I know that we don't see it often often in paints, especially the main big brands. I've seen it a bit in gouache, I've seen it in a lot of Chinese paints, but on its own, I don't remember seeing it anywhere. The overall mix here with the three pigments makes for a really nice turquoise color, and I really like it as well. And then finally, we have Prussian blue. It is the darkest blue we have in this set, and it is really nice and lovely and very, very deep. Then we have 6 greens as well, and the first one here is sap green, and right away it has PO49 in it. Again, another one of those pigments that is no longer manufactured. But this one is quinacridone gold, the fabled discontinued pigment. I don't know what's up with that. The color itself is lovely. It is a really nice, warm, slightly muted green, really beautiful, but where does that PO49 comes from? And can we get more of it, please? Then we have a color that's named Emerald. It's a cooler bluish green. Usually when you get a color named Emerald in a set, it's just PG7, but for this one here, we have a bit of yellow in the mix as well. It's not all that visible, but it's there. Then we have Intense Green, which is also a mix of green and yellow pigment, but it brings us to a more middle kind of green, perhaps a bit similar to phthalo green yellow shade. And then we have Hooker's Green Light, which is a mix of 3 pigments, but again, there is some quinacridone gold in here apparently. What? Where? How? What? The color itself is also really beautiful. It looks more natural. It's kind of a grain that feels like you don't really need to mute it down to use it. A really beautiful mix of a blue, yellow, and a green. And then we have Hooker's Green Deep, which is similar a bit to the previous one, but a very different color on its own. It's also a very natural looking color, a very deep, dark color that I think is also equally beautiful. And I definitely gravitate towards this kind of green when I paint because it's easy to use and good to go. And then we have a color named Viridian. It is a Viridian hue. It is not actual Viridian, but it is a mix of our PB17 pigment again, you know, the rare odd one, and then PG7. It is very similar to the emerald color. I haven't really seen a difference between the two of them in my usage so far. That's it for the greens. And then last section is the earth tones, and we have 7 of those. Our very first one is raw sienna. Now, usually colors that are either single pigment raw sienna or even colors that are a mix but named raw sienna, you often get this issue with them that they're super patchy. It's super difficult to get a smooth wash of color. But with this one, that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be really easy to use and fairly transparent, so that would be really awesome. And then we have yellow ochre, which is a very similar hue to raw sienna, but the main difference between the two is that yellow ochre is usually more opaque and also kind of more even. While they are similar hues, they really have different properties, which is why you might end up using both. Then we have burnt sienna. They went the route of using the PR101 pigment for the burnt sienna, which gives us a very red-orange burnt sienna that is also very transparent. Then we have Indian red. Again, same pigment as the burnt sienna, but as you can see, a completely different hue, texture, opacity. This one seems to be more opaque and more granulating, but it is a really nice, deep muted red color. Then we have raw umber. And again, like the raw sienna, this one is on point for the hue, the general hue of this color usually, even if it's made from a mix of 2 pigments. It has the added benefit of being really smooth and not patchy, which is again an issue that we see a lot with raw umber as a color. It has this really weird texture that when you lay it down, it's difficult to get a nice smooth wash. But for this color, that seems to be much easier to do. Then Van Dyke Brown. So this Van Dyke Brown seems to be very vibrant. It is a mix of 2 pigments and it's a really nice brown. I don't know how accurate it is to the general consensus of what a Van Dyke Brown is supposed to look like, but on its own, very nice color. And the last one, finally, Burnt Umber. Also a mix of 2 pigment. It seems to be quite on point for the hue and it's a really nice, beautiful, deep dark brown. Overall, I would say that these colors are all great colors, except perhaps for the white. In my opinion, I can deal with a more opaque white, but the transparent white is still a bit of an enigma to me. I haven't figured out any use for it. So it is not my favorite color. But all the other colors, I really like them. I think the earth hues are amazing. They have a really nice range of color that seem to be really easy to work with and deliver a good performance. I'm really puzzled by all the discontinued pigments in this range. I don't know what's up with that. I don't know where they find them. I really love the colors that are made with them and definitely colors that I would use, but I'm still puzzled because if these pigments are supposed to be discontinued and no longer manufactured, where are they getting them from? So yeah, I would really love to know more about how they source these pigments, particularly, both as a pigment nerd and as a painter. I like to do a sniff test with paints when I remember to do it, of course. Some paints can have a really strong smell, and I know that some people are really sensitive to that, so I feel it's important information. I've put my nose in the palette and I didn't smell anything, so as far as I can tell, these don't have any kind of smell or scent about them. The only flaw, perhaps, about the paint is that the majority of them in the matte tone will have a bit of a shine. Usually that's indicative of there being more gum arabic or more binder, because the binder is what is a bit shiny in this formula. If you like to paint with really intense colors, what we call the matte tone, like the deepest the color can be, and you don't like shiny paints in that aspect, then that's something to keep in mind. But otherwise, if you dilute your paints and mix them and don't go full 110% matte tone often, these are perfectly fine. My favorite things about this set, like I said, is the color selection in general, the fact that all the earth hues are really nice and smooth and not patchy, and also my favorite is that really weird gamboge that kind of looks more like a quinacridone gold than a gamboge. I don't know what's up, like I said, but I'm here for it, and I love that color. Another color that I find super interesting and that I really like is their Payne's Gray. Now, I haven't seen a lot of Payne's Gray that were granulating like this, and I really like it. As for my painting, I used the little sketchbook they sent me along with the paints, and I really liked it. The paints in the sketchbook, they layered well, they mixed well, and I was able to do both like a big wash with water and then layers, and also a more precise paint application. I didn't encounter any issues whatsoever. The paints worked well. In the sketchbook, I was able to draw and ink in the sketchbook, and really it all went really well. This paper is super nice. It doesn't seem to have a visible side, which is always a great feature, and I like that it is a small size but not too small, you know. It is a really good pocket or travel kit kind of size. The sketchbook itself seems to be really well made. There were not any kind of binding issue, but I haven't used it a lot, so perhaps I'll have a different opinion on it when I'm through with it, but so far so good. The only thing that personally is not really my jam is having perforated sheets. It just bothers me. I don't really know why, but regardless of the type of sketchbook, I would love it if they would make sketchbook with no perforated sheets. It's fairly easy to grab a scissor and to cut off a sheet, but having the perforations in there kind of makes for a weird place where the paper bends, and I don't know, I'm just not vibing with it really. That's my only issue, but it's a very personal issue and bias, so make of that what you will. Would I recommend these, the set and the sketchbook? And I think I would. The palette itself is, like the tin, is so pretty and roomy, and you have space to add your own colors and to grow the palette to a selection that you really, really like. And for what it is really affordable. I think the sketchbook is also worth it because the paper is nice, it is cotton paper, it has a nice texture, it doesn't have a clear side, and I was able to paint in it and it didn't buckle, it didn't do anything weird, it behaved seamlessly. Like if you don't notice it, that's when you know it's good. Paul Rubens is celebrating its 15th anniversary, and because of that, they are holding a lot of promotions and sales and events and stuff. I'll have the info in the description if you want to check that out. And that's it. I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. And again, thank you so much, Paul Rubens, for sending me this palette and the sketchbook to try out. And thank you so much to you guys for watching this video. We will see each other in the next one. Take care. Bye bye.